What would you do if the key to your own home suddenly felt like it belonged to a stranger S-lock? I stood there, under the flickering porch light on a Tuesday I'd later wish had never existed, my hand frozen on the doorknob. I was home 3 hours early from a business trip to Dallas, a surprise meant to be a romantic gesture. But a low murmur from inside, a sound that wasn't my wife Sarah's voice alone, turned my homecoming into a horror film. The air, thick with the scent of a cologne I didn't own, was the first clue. The second was a pair of polished leather shoes by the door size 11, definitely not mine. A cold dread, sharp and metallic like a razor blade, slid down my throat. I never thought this would be my story. But the moment I pushed that door open, I knew my life was over. It was just a question of how I'd bury the body. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. The scene inside was sickeningly domestic, a twisted parody of our life. There was Sarah, my wife of 7 years, laughing. It was a full, throaty laugh I hadn't heard in months, reserved now, it seemed, for him. Mark. Her boss. He was sitting on my sofa, a glass of my best whiskey in his hand, looking as comfortable as if he owned the place. The humiliation was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. They hadn't seen me. I backed out silently, the click of the latch echoing the snap of my heart. I spent that night in a cheap motel off the I-90. The green glow of the vacancy sign painting the room in shades of sickness. That was the beginning. The strange behavior I'd dismissed for months suddenly clicked into place like a combination lock. The late nights at the office. The way she'd angle her phone away from me. A screen glowing with secrets at 2 a.m. The receipts for dinners in Lincoln Park I was never invited to. It was all there, a breadcrumb trail leading to my own personal hell. When I finally confronted her, the warmth she once had was gone, replaced by a chilling, manipulative coldness. "You're being paranoid, Tom," she'd said, her eyes like chips of ice. "Mark is just my boss. Maybe if you weren't so insecure, you'd see that." She twisted the knife with a smug smile, making me the villain in a story she wrote. They both did. I saw Mark at a company function a week later. He clapped me on the shoulder, a proprietary smirk on his face. "Heard you're feeling a little stressed, buddy," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. They felt untouchable, wrapped in their arrogance and deceit. That was the night I broke. I drove out to Montrose Harbor, the Chicago skyline a blur of indifferent lights through my tears. The man who had built a life on loyalty and love died that night on the shores of Lake Michigan.
Oh.
In his place, something else was born. Something cold, strategic, and utterly ruthless.
Oh.
My grief turned to fuel. The first step was proof. I hired a private investigator, a grizzled ex-cop who operated out of a dusty office in the Loop. He was expensive, but worth every penny. He gave me photos. Photos of them checking into the peninsula on North Michigan Avenue, their hands intertwined. Photos of them kissing in a secluded booth at Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse. He gave me audio recordings of their calls, their whispered promises and casual mockery of me. Each piece of evidence was a stone I used to build the foundation of my revenge. While Sarah was busy living her double life, I was busy meeting with the best divorce attorney in Chicago. We didn't just file for divorce, we prepared for war. I moved my assets into a trust she couldn't touch. I documented every lie, every dollar she spent on her affair. I found the prenuptial agreement we'd signed on a whim, the one she'd laughed about, and had my lawyer sharpen it into a weapon. The trap was set. The public exposure was the centerpiece. Sarah's family was old money, obsessed with their pristine reputation in the high society circles of the Gold Coast. Her father was hosting his annual charity gala, a massive event with every important name in the city on the guest list. It was the perfect stage. 2 days before the event, I had a legal courier serve. Mark, with a lawsuit at his office for alienation of affection and intentional infliction of emotional distress, citing his position of power over my wife. The news spread through their corporate headquarters like wildfire, was suspended immediately. Then came the main event. As Sarah's father was on stage, giving a speech about family values and integrity, a special delivery arrived for every guest. A simple, elegant envelope. Inside, A single, glossy 8x10 photo of Sarah and Mark kissing on the balcony of their hotel room. The Chicago skyline glittering behind them. And a small card with a link to a website I'd created, a digital archive of their affair. Texts, receipts, recordings, a symphony of their betrayal. The silence in that ballroom was absolute. Then a wave of gasps and whispers. I watched from the back, a ghost at the feast. I saw the horror on her father's face, the fury in her mother's. I saw Sarah, her face ashen, as she realized her world had just been set on fire. She was ruined. Socially, she was a pariah. Legally, she walked away with nothing but the clothes on her back, our prenup holding firm. Her family, mortified beyond measure, cut her off completely. The last I heard, she was working a dead-end job in a suburb I'd never heard of, living in a cramped apartment that smelled of despair. The empire she thought she was inheriting had crumbled to dust, all for a cheap thrill. I sold the house on that quiet street in Lincoln Park. I couldn't stand the ghosts. Sometimes late at night I think about that Tuesday. I think about the man I was and the man I became. The revenge wasn't a victory. It was just an ending. My life is quiet now, the silence a heavy blanket. But all I have to show for it is the ashes of a life I once loved. Right. The end.